Hi, Joyce. Good afternoon. Welcome on board.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good to see you
Very
again.
excited to be here and conducting the masterclass. Who moved my market share? Or
Oh,
are
move
we
my
going to
market
move the
share.
competitor's market share?
Right. I see your slide already there, so I'm going to pull them up and you can start the masterclass. Good luck.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Enzo. So, for years, revenue managers used historical data as a compass to navigate rates and inventory. So, due to the pandemic, however, historical data lost some of their relevance, as last year and this year really will go in the books as statistical anomalies. Past metrics to measure against competitors are still valid, but other information, such as the on the books, reservations, pickup, pays, and of course, your competitive set, have become more important. In this masterclass, we will cover why do we need to benchmark, who should we benchmark against, is there only one or multiple competitors? We've already spoken a lot about that during the panel session today. How can organizations select their competitors? And what KPIs to benchmark in order for you to control the movement of your market share instead of the competition moving your market share? So let's start with the most important question. Why do we benchmark? Many people in the industry will say we benchmark because it's an owner's request, it's required for investments and asset valuations, or we measure it to see if we're capturing our fair share in the market. These are all really great reasons, but what is the real purpose of benchmarking? The most common one is measuring your performance against the competition. Through benchmarking, we can measure and analyze who moved my market share or how is my organization shaking things up with the competition. Benchmarking supports with understanding and discovering new opportunities and identifying performance gaps, whilst continuously searching for and applying of significantly better practices that lead to improvements in superior competitive performance. Benchmarking is not a one-time exercise, but an ongoing process as an integral part of your strategy. The Insights Gate for your premier process provides organizations with a foundation to strategic thinking and leads to greater awareness of the need for long-term planning. Once we've identified the purpose, we will better understand why we benchmark and who we need to benchmark against. The challenge organizations face is to how to clearly identify one's comp set. The pandemic is reshaping source markets and therefore altering the landscape. With travel restrictions unfortunately still in place, it's likely the recovery will go from a micro level, in other words, domestic and drive-up market, to an international-oriented macro level. So as a result, the competitive landscape will change over time and requires the need for re-evaluation. Understanding your competitors today will be vital in shaping your strategy and measuring your performance and success. Your competitive landscape may have changed drastically over the year. You may now face multiple competitors, including some that were not considered direct competitors before. So to determine your competitive current comp set, we must first go back to basics in understanding your customer base. Who are your customers? It's important to have a clear understanding of who your potential guests are. Review how to segment them and reevaluate who else is targeting them. What do they want? Behaviors are changing, so what your customers are looking for may have changed, and with that, their choices. Ask yourself, where would they go if you didn't have availability? And lastly, what do they value? Price sensitivity and perception of value has also changed, so revisit how your services and products are valued by the customer. When your competitor resembles you, chances are it will pursue a similar market. When a property has a different product offering, market positioning, and strategy, they will probably react to the same market opportunities and threats in a different way. One of the keys to predicting a competitor's future strategy is to understand how much or how little it resembles your organization. We're all very familiar with the traditional factors that determine your competitive set, such as proximity, product, positioning, and size. In recent years, segmentation and demand patterns and pricing beyond bar and lead-in room category have been emerging factors in determining your optimal competitive set, and has even been of greater significance in a post-pandemic world. So let's look at the 4 emerging markets factors we consider in determining your true competitor. A true competitor is a property that competes with you in most of your segments, which are generating demand for your property. This might have changed drastically with COVID-19 and will change again once recovery is starting to move to a new mature market. Most destinations in the world are experiencing the prominence of segments such as domestic and drive-up market, staycations and short stay, corporate business, and leisure weekend business. Another important factor to evaluate is how properties with traditional high group and conferencing business are positioning themselves today in the market. Are they temporarily going after leisure segments that are driving segments for your property? And how long will they continue to uphold this strategy? And should I now consider them in my competitive set? Of course, this evaluation goes both ways for properties with strong conferencing. A true competitor is a property which undergoes similar demand patterns year-round or during a particular season, which is important for a period for your business. So how do we find out those demand patterns? Having the right kind of revenue management system can help you dive into the data to make sense of the demand patterns. Keep track of renovations, new inventory in the market, use demand, marketing tools, OTA dashboards, and rate shopping tools to understand the impact of business shifts in mix. A true competitor is a property which makes a pricing action that would force you to respond, or the opposite. Defining a proper comp set has always been paramount to determine price positioning, and rate shopping data is a vital element in this process. Utilizing rate shopping data is not only to optimize your pricing, but to create a better understanding of the impacts competitor pricing has on your unconstrained demand and therefore your forecast, which in return influences your pricing decisions. Rate shopping data supports you with identifying those price and demand trends. When analyzing rate shopping data, operators are very well versed with the correlation between competitor pricing and your own pricing. But are we analyzing the correlation of changes in price? How erratic and reactive is our competition with their pricing? Are they following an ascending price model, or do they tend to drop closer to the arrival date, their price? How are their price changes for standard rooms and suites? Many times, analysis of competitor prices and changes are performed in isolation from your booking patterns and forecast. Is your booking window the same as your competitors? OTA analysis dashboards provide you with great free data insights in how your booking window compares to your competitive set or your market. Operators are inclined to compare pricing with their competitors just for the leading category and for their best available and lowest rate. But it goes beyond that. It is important to evaluate which competitors you're competing with by segment, channel, and in your room classes, for example, suites. So if you're comparing to a high upscale resort, it could be that not always you would compete with their suites, but just with their standard rooms. So it's important to evaluate and look at your competitive sets for each of your room types or room classes. A revenue management system such as IDeaS RMS supports the use of competitor pricing trends by using rate shopping data covering all 4 trends I've just discussed in the optimization of forecast and pricing decisions, which conveys how powerful the data is when used best during uncertain pandemic and recovery times. Let's look at the last emerging factor, which is destinations and niche markets. By tradition, hospitality organizations determine their competitors in proximity of their property. However, with the shift in demand towards domestic drive-up market, it is important for organizations to understand how they're competing with other destinations and, in a wider perspective, industries. The properties next to you may not be necessarily your direct competitor. Sometimes a property which is located on the other side of the city might be a heavier competitor. And in case of resorts, you might want to compare yourself with similar properties around the world. A great example is the Miami South Beach market, which has been doing really well in recovery. They're still performing really well in Q2 and 3, but because it is the summer in the US and borders are still closed, travel restrictions are still in place for the European market, US business is now having the choice to go to national parks or lake areas than going to Miami. So there's a bigger competition to other locations in the US now for the Miami market, whilst they're not getting the business from the European market. Another important immersion factor is the niche markets. Pre-pandemic, we saw the uprise of short-term rental, and with the demand from digital nomads and staycations, this niche market will continue to be a great influence in the hospitality industry, and therefore should be considered into your competitive analysis. So while understanding and ideally getting ahead of the competition is fundamental, it is important to remember that in current instances, your biggest competitor may be yourself. It is absolutely important to work together as a unified commercial team in a constantly changing landscape. Organizations should start competing with themselves to define strategies and commercial success. And this really brings me to the next component of determining who moved my market share, and that is the what. What are we measuring after we identified who our competitors are? The pandemic has resulted in a radical market disruption that makes goal setting tricky and often unreliable. Therefore, it is important to highlight the need to set KPIs relative to competitors' performance during disruption, and even to a greater extent in the recovery phase. With traditional metrics are still important performance measurements, the industry has begun gravitating towards other standards that represent their wider spectrum of operations. There's still limited competitive data available in terms of profitability KPIs. But it's important for organizations to start measuring these internally to better understand their revenue versus profitability ratio in order to make strategic decisions in relation to pricing, special offers, where to spend marketing, and which distribution channels to collaborate with. So let's look at the emerging KPIs in more detail. Beyond the application of advanced data modeling techniques, the industry faces an accelerating change with calls for needing high-frequency data and utilizing unconventional indicators for clarity. Information such as the on-the-books reservations, pickup, pace, competitive pricing by segment and room class, all the way to distribution and marketing channels, they really have become more relevant than ever before. In a time where resources are critical, leveraging technologies such as revenue management systems, demand and rate shopping tools can highly contribute to make forward-looking, data-driven decisions and support the measurement of key performance indicators. The next transforming opportunity is focusing on total organizational revenue and profit optimization. Paid revenue and revenue capture percentage support your strategy of truly comparing apples to apples when analyzing your revenue and ADR potential. by adding the markup and commissions from wholesalers and online travel agencies to the revenues and ADR. These measurements help the property understand what consumers are willing to pay and gives a performance-based analysis of what and how much revenue is truly kept after customer acquisition costs are paid. Another next generation key performance indicator is TRevPAR, total revenue per available room, which supports the property strategy to look at revenues holistically, including ancillary revenues, which all makes significant contributions to your overall revenue and profitability. When ancillary revenue streams, such as F&B, banqueting, and spa services, are not properly measured and evaluated, property's big picture in terms of profitability misses critical pieces that metrics like gross operating profit per occupied rooms can fulfill. The next set of KPIs is all about controlling your cost of generating business. COPE measures the percentage of net revenue that is produced by each channel, which allows for an analysis of profitability at the channel, segment, rate code, or individual booking level. And the next step would be to calculate your sales and marketing efficiency, which provide you with insights on the efficiency of how much revenue is generated for every dollar spent on sales and marketing. And lastly, whilst meetings and events is not on everyone's radar right now, the segment will return, and in some markets, we have seen recovery. We've seen an increase in meeting and events requests already. Establishing KPIs that measure areas beyond rooms to meetings and event space is typically the best place for organizations to start. Emerging KPIs in function space revenue management, for example, are space utilization, conversion, and attendee density. They're fast becoming the industry standard metric in evaluating function space performance. So far, we've covered in great length the why, who, and what. So that leads me to how are we going to do this? There are 3 phases in benchmarking, of which the pre-benchmarking phase is the most important one, which really focuses on the why and the who, and starts with your own organization to get clarity on the why. In the benchmarking process, there are 2 whys we need to ask. The first one is, what is your purpose, or in other words, your motivation of performing a benchmark exercise? Benchmarking for demand and pricing processes need different evaluations and therefore may need a different competitive set than when you buy a benchmark for financial reporting. This means that you can have complete different competitive sets for your SDR or to look at your pricing and demand trends. The second why we need to answer is, why do customers choose your accommodation? What makes you stand out from the competition? The second why can be answered with a few techniques and tools, and that's starting with the 5 whys. Use, for example, your reputation data to answer the why. The 5 whys is an effective technique in preparation of a SWOT analysis. Conducting a strengths, weaknesses, opportunity, and threat analysis is a powerful way to evaluate your organization. SWOT analyses are used to determine how closely your business is aligned with its growth trajectories, success benchmarks, and in line with your corporate identity. The last 2 questions to answer about your organization is, how has your property and market changed since the pandemic? And how do you anticipate the market and your property to change once the market is entering the recovery phase or is entering a matured state of a new norm? So let's now focus more on the competition in the pre-benchmarking phase. Before we look at a micro level who your competition may be, we need to evaluate the competitive environment from a macro level, which can be mapped using the Porter's 5 forces. It is a simple but very powerful tool for understanding the forces that shape competition help to adjust your strategy, and to improve your potential profit. By thinking about how each force affects you and by identifying its strengths and direction, you can quickly assess your position at a macro level. On a micro level, it is important to first map your current competitive set you're using today across all channels, from SDR to your revenue management system, demand, reputation, and rate shopping tools, before scanning the market for potential competitors by using the traditional and emerging factors in your research. Whilst it's time-consuming, it is important to inspect the selected properties physically and online. Just like you continuously improve your service offerings and facilities, so do your competitors. And we need to answer, what is their value proposition? What are their strengths and weaknesses? And by collecting all the data, you're able to perform a price and value assessment to select your competitors. Completing the steps will provide you with the information to make data-driven decisions in selecting your competitive set by factor. You may have more than one set. Your competitive set by market segment may be different to your competitive set that you have for your room classes or location. It is important to answer the question, why do I need this competitive set? And what will I be benchmarking the set against? So now let's look at what are we going to benchmark, or how are we going to go through that process of benchmarking. So in this phase, we will determine the scope by identifying the key performance indicators that answer the why. Building a framework to measure the KPIs is the next step, followed by sourcing the data to be able to calculate the KPIs. The analysis and measure stage is straightforward. If you have done your groundwork in the pre-benchmarking phase and determined the scope of benchmarking. And with all measurements, it's always about test, evaluate, revise, and test again. The last phase in benchmarking is about evaluating your process, measurements, and competitive sets. Develop a framework of the what. What KPIs are you measuring, and creating a discipline of the how. Once that process is established, you can develop a strategy and action plan which needs to be reviewed on a regular basis. And lastly, it's all about re-evaluating and repetition. COVID-19 has triggered industry disruptions that underline the need to increasingly utilize competitor-based KPI benchmarking. Use benchmarking to effectively accelerate profitable change and, with help, a steady recovery by developing a holistic plan. Adopt total organizational metrics and make data-driven decisions. And this leads me to a summary and discuss the 5 focus areas from today's masterclass. Number 1, clearly create a clarity of why. Use the 5 whys technique to answer 2 whys. Why benchmarking? And why are your customers choosing your products? Secondly, create discipline of how and create consistency of the what. Focus on your organization first by performing a SWOT analysis. What is your value proposition? Utilize resources available to you, such as reputation data, TripAdvisor, Google reviews, and ask your staff from different departments. They will be able to give you some great insights. Analyze and define your competition at a macro and micro level. Use Porter's 5 forces to establish a macro impact on your performance and influence of competition. One of the keys to predicting a competitor's future strategy is to understand how much or how little it resembles your organization. Determine your competitors beyond traditional factors. Really understand who your competitors are based on segmentation, room class, destinations, demand patterns, reputation, and pricing, and even combinations of those factors. Doing so, you will be able to react to market opportunities and threats in a strategic way. Making a concerted effort to start the process of tracking total organization and profitability performance metrics, in addition to having the right technology and processes in place to really capture, measure, and control these KPIs. It will help establish a baseline for property teams to work towards common goals, such as increased market share, revenue, and profitability. And while the industry does not yet focus on standard KPIs to account for total revenue performance and profitability, total profitable revenue management is the future. So this leads me to the end of the masterclass and how to take control over the movement of your market share. I hope you enjoyed today's session. If you'd like to contact me or want to know more about what IDeaS can mean for you, please find my details here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joyce. Brilliant. Well, IDeaS is always coming with something really, really insightful and always interesting. And I really appreciate your masterclass. I'm sure the audience will keep asking you the slides. I see already a few comments in LinkedIn, people watching those sessions and asking for slides. So guys, feel free to get in touch also via LinkedIn to
Absolutely.
Joyce or on the website on IDeaS. And I'm sure that you can get those amazing masterclass piece, right? Let me open. Jill is back. Thank you, Joyce, once again, and I'll see you soon.
I just want to throw in.
Sorry. Go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
Just want to throw in a special thank you to Joyce. That was really amazing. But what is really impressive is that you're doing that in the middle of your night. What many people don't know, you're actually in Australia right now. And so kudos to you for giving such an exciting and amazing masterclass in the middle of the night.
I know, I'm actually wide awake right now.
Sleep tight.
I will. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joyce.
Thank you, Joyce.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
That was great.
Thank you,
Thank you.